I am Brett Burney from NextPoint, and I am thrilled that we have Jerry Crawford with us, joining us today. Jerry is the Principal Director of KGC Consulting Services Limited, where he has over 44 years of experience in building and civil construction, primarily in Canada and the United States. And Jerry's expertise includes management and contract administration, with a focus on claims and disputes, expert report writing, and litigation support. And all of those are the primary reasons that we wanted to talk with Jerry, to have him share some of his insights for our construction litigation customers. Now, at NextPoint, we have a large number of construction companies and litigation law firms that take full advantage of our unlimited data and hosting plans, since a huge part of disputes that involve construction in some form or fashion have enormous amounts of electronically stored information that are documents, pictures, files, etc. So, Jerry, when we come in and work with a litigation team, in order to collect all of that information so that it can be reviewed and produced to the other side, we have to know where to go to find that information. What are some important document management considerations for an organization when it comes to managing all of those files, all of that information, so that they can get access to it quickly when they need to?
Yeah, that's a great intro, Brett, and thank you for that great question. I'm going to tackle it from some different angles today. Because it is a big field of a lot of information that needs to be combed through quite often at the end of a project when things don't go so well. And even sometimes during execution of the project, you could have an interim claim that is posing some challenges to the stakeholders. So it's vital to have a policy for the location of both physical and electronic documents. Seldom do we see much thought given to this area of the storage of these documents and where they're going. Having a good numbering and naming convention system, definitions and terminology policy would be advisable on these mega projects that last several months, sometimes several years, whatever jurisdiction you're working in. A lot of times, teams fail to adopt standardized template, which is extremely important and helpful. They may be talking at cross purposes about the same document. They may not necessarily be on the same page when they're working through particular delay issues that impact a project. Most importantly, they should have somebody who's assigned custody of the official records. In the contract law, there is a records retention policy, particularly with related to structural issues. Those records have to be available for 7 years due to warranty issues. A lot of projects, have extended warranties today. You could have warranties that last 20 years or more for solar panel installations. So where do those records go when the project is complete? Over the years, I've seen many times on older assets where buildings have to be rehabilitated, and maybe the records are 20 years old, sitting in a basement service utility room, not in very good shape. And if you ever have to make alterations or additions or deal with insurance issues after the fact, if you have a P3 arrangement, you have to be able to, facility management reasons, be able to get at those records. Do organizations have a written security and retention policy for the documents, and do they follow it? A lot of organizations have policies. They're not necessarily the best at following what's been documented in terms of those procedures.
Jerry, I would just jump in and say many times we go to maybe a location, whether it's an office building or maybe on site or so, and we find that some people that maybe that oversee this, a project manager, a designer, or maybe even an owner, a contractor, like they have a good idea of where some of their documents are located, But unless they have something akin to what you were just talking about with naming conventions, for example, or a standard practice of where they're storing the documents, it doesn't always turn out that well, especially when we have to collect those documents, maybe in order for them to review them or to produce them, certainly within a dispute environment. Maybe just quickly, what are some other best practices? You mentioned the naming convention, for example. What are just some of the things that you see that are actually helpful when you've gone in and worked with certain organizations that may be a good practice to do?
Well, certainly, the criticality of, the as-built drawings for sure is vitally important. Having that as-built schedule, whether it's required or not under the contract, it still should be done so people understand how they got to the date that they did. Commissioning can be a big challenge today. All too often, organizations wait too long to bring in the facility manager or the commissioning team to be able to set the pace for handing over the building and what's going to be required in the production of documents and who's going to have to give approvals. Is there a policy on redundancy? A lot of organizations don't give consideration to that policy now with the explosion in additional cloud and server farms. It's not the issue it was, but you need to be able to look at if your records are hacked, then what's your plan B? Do you have a backup policy where it can't be hacked and easily be restored? So, and this applies across the board to any stakeholder, whether it's the designer, the owner, the contractor, the trade.
I assume, Jerry, when you get involved from your organization, from what KGC is called, that you go in and of course, some of the documents that need to be found. Are you helping the individuals, maybe from an IT perspective sometimes, and all of the players that are involved? Are you helping them to better manage those documents or give them some best tips and practices, both from the general overall organization of it, as well as maybe a retention period on some of these documents?
Yes. On a proactive note, we'd like to come in early in the process, look at their procedures, look at, do they have a good onboarding training protocol with new staff within organizations? Do they have an email etiquette policy? Do they have a folder structure and a subfolder structure there's probably about 8 areas where they need to really track the change and the change management that's going on in the project. Too often, many organizations do not have a robust change management policy. Having a subfolder structure for particular things like schedules, RFIs, change orders, all of those kind of critical week minutes of meetings, schedules. Those are key documents that we're very interested in when we come in. And the process was, what was the communication like? Was it responsive? Too often today, we're seeing, unfortunately, a trend of people not responding to telephone calls quickly or critical emails quickly. And there are lags that are impacting organizations in terms of approvals. Shop drawings, in particular, is a technical byproduct of the execution. It's not uncommon today to see 6, 7, 8 submissions on the same component. This can certainly drag out the process. We want to understand why those shop drawing issues were so elongated in terms of the approvals.
So maybe at the end here, Jerry, can you just give us a flavor of what are some of the risks of not having a sound document management policy? I feel like you've provided some really great best practices or tips, maybe for folks that are going to be watching this, that here are some I guess some practices to put into play or to consider at least, so that you're not kind of scrambling at the last minute. But what are some of those other risks as we round out there? And then maybe you can even include, like, okay, here's how you get around those risks, or here's how you can avoid those risks or better manage them.
Sure. Contracts, by their very nature and construction, usually have a lot of baked in responsibilities, either express or implied terms. Some of the areas extend to the four key ones are the financial, legal, operational, and regulatory. So if you have lots of change orders within your project, how are you tracking that time impact? I see many change orders where there's no allocation of time impact that is having on the schedule. And, how do you defend or assert your position if you don't have a good time tracking template? If you're late, there's funding. Chances are there's going to be audits, whether they're public or private. They're going to want to see the paper trail in terms of where money was typically lost. Sometimes there's bonuses to be had, but still you need that paper trail for audit. Legal, if you find yourself in court in some jurisdictions, there can be fines for improper, poor records. The Sedona principles, they apply in the US and Canada, and they are to be observed and followed. Most project engineers that are project managers have not a lot of awareness of these principles. Then there is the costly element of losing in litigation with inferior records. For instance, if you have been solving some of the problems by text, it's not ideal if you have to produce those challenges that arose much later down the road. Operational is an area I talked about. The handover of various records to facility managers at completion is often required. Do you have the test records, the inspection records, the as-built records, the warranties? When did the warranties start? This is all very good tort space or litigation, and the courts are clogged with many of these discussions. I mentioned earlier the extended warranties and some of the components. Regulatory, big issue. When I started in the business 44 years ago, there was not a lot of attention paid to health and safety, safety training records, health and safety policies. Owners can be exposed to hefty fines in some jurisdictions for accidents, even though the contractor may have primacy. He'll definitely want to see those health and safety meetings, and he'll want to see those health and safety records. And the contractor is advised, all in attendance, the owner is watching for KPI metrics on accidents. Now, I was recently involved with a client who told me, working in Canada for a US data management server farm, that they were very, very concerned about accidents in terms of that KPI tracking and injuries. If you have an injured worker, a training history needs to be provided. It's very time-consuming and expensive defending a legal position with sketchy records.
Jerry, this has been so great, and we really appreciate your time just sharing some of your insights and experience and expertise with us. If there was one thing that people could take away from our short conversation today, what would be a best practice that you would say would be the best thing that they could start implementing now to best avoid the risks of litigation and the time-consuming aspects of that all of that would include?
I think a robust document management policy is mission critical today. It's not an afterthought. It needs to be carefully focused and tracked on the risk register, like an execution plan. How are they going to implement good document management to keep themselves out of lengthy, time-consuming events later, trying to reconstruct the past? You need to have a solid record management. Some of the files we've worked on, in excess of 500,000 documents, you need a policy to be able to handle that much terabyte of information.
That's great, Jerry. And thanks again for joining us today. You can find out a lot more about Jerry and some of the resources that he has online at the website for KGC Consulting, which is kgcconsulting.ca. And if you needed to find any more information about NextPoint, a place there where you can place all of these documents that you've collected and prepare for disputes or resolutions, you can find out more information at nextpoint.com. Thanks again for joining us today, Jerry.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Brett.